The church was glowing with soft golden lights, the floral arrangements perfectly lined along the pews, and my name, Aubrey, embroidered on the velvet runner down the aisle. It was supposed to be the happiest weekend of my life. Instead, it became the first time I ever truly realized my family didn't just fail to protect me, they were rooting for me to fall. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. I had spent months planning this wedding. Every detail, the lilies in the bouquet, the classical quartet, the deep blush color scheme, it all came from years of dreaming and scraping together what little I had after working 2 jobs. My fiancé, Jordan, had no family left. He was raised in foster care and barely survived high school without someone to call home. I wanted this wedding to give us that feeling of roots, of celebration, of being seen. But I should have known better. My parents, Cynthia and Greg, never saw me unless it was to compare me to my brother Caleb. "He's the real star," Mom always said. "You're smart, Aubrey, but Caleb shines." Caleb was 3 years younger than me, but got treated like royalty. He failed out of college twice, couldn't hold a job, and still got a BMW for his 25th birthday. Meanwhile, when I graduated summa cum laude with 2 degrees, Dad patted me on the back like I'd just remembered to take out the trash. The rehearsal dinner was the night it all came apart. I arrived in a soft pearl dress with matching heels, feeling like maybe, just maybe, this day would be different. The guests were arriving. Jordan was radiant. My best friend Maya handed me a small handkerchief embroidered with A+J = forever. I smiled, until Caleb strolled in with sunglasses on, late, drunk, and loud. "Yo, who died? Why's everyone dressed like we're at a funeral?" He laughed, slapping my back hard. "Caleb," I hissed, "can you be quiet for once?" He raised an eyebrow. "Relax, you're not even married yet and already acting like a bitter housewife." I walked away, trying to refocus on the schedule, the aisle walk, the cues, the vows. Everything was on track until we began the processional practice. I was standing at the top of the venue staircase, taking a deep breath, holding faux flowers as we were about to simulate the walk. That's when it happened. I heard Caleb behind me mutter, "Bet she'd fall better than she walks." And then, a shove. My heel twisted, my body pitched forward, and I tumbled down the stairs. Gasps filled the room. I landed hard on my left side, my shoulder screaming in pain. I felt dazed, humiliated, and bruised. Jordan rushed to me, panic in his eyes. Maya was already calling an ambulance. My parents? They didn't move an inch. Mom sipped her champagne and muttered, "Oh, for God's sake, Aubrey. It's always something with you." Dad barked, "Stop making drama. It's just a tumble. You're not made of glass." "Caleb?" He stood there with that smug, twitching smirk. No apology, not even a glance. At the ER, they told me I had a fractured collarbone. I'd need to keep my left arm in a sling, and it would be sore and stiff for weeks. "You'll have to adjust the dress," the nurse said gently, "but you'll be okay." Would I? That night, Jordan and I sat quietly in our shared apartment. He had tears in his eyes. "Aubrey," he whispered, "why do you let them treat you like this?" And I realized I was done. Done letting my parents belittle me. Done letting Caleb skate through life while I cleaned up every mess. Done pretending blood meant loyalty. I turned to Jordan and said 6 words that would change everything. "I'm taking the venue back, tomorrow." And I meant it. The next morning, sunlight poured through our bedroom window, but it didn't feel like a wedding day. It felt like a day of war. Jordan sat beside me as I slowly buttoned up a soft robe, my collarbone aching. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm not walking into that church," I said, "but I am walking into the venue." I wasn't about to let them smile and pose in photos, pretending to be a loving family. Not after they laughed while I lay at the bottom of the stairs. And definitely not after Mom called me dramatic while I sat there injured, bruised, and crying in front of the guests. What they didn't know was that the venue was in my name. Only mine. I had paid for it in full months earlier after taking a short-term consulting gig that kept me working 12-hour days. I signed every contract, wrote every check, even coordinated directly with the owner, an older woman named Eleanor who treated me like her own daughter. I called Eleanor that morning. "Sweetheart," she said, "I heard about the rehearsal. I'm so sorry." "Thank you," I replied quietly. "I need to make some changes to today's reservation." "Say the word." I took a breath and said, "Block out the guests who RSVP'd from my family. The wedding will go on, but they're not welcome. None of them." There was a pause. Then Eleanor chuckled warmly. "Consider it done." And so it began. While my parents were busy getting their hair styled and my brother was sleeping off his hangover, the entire wedding was being flipped behind their backs. My bridal team contacted every vendor. Maya ran point on logistics. The guest list was filtered. Everyone who'd supported us stayed. Everyone who mocked me? Cut. At noon, my mom called. "You better be here by 1 o'clock or this wedding is off." I smiled into the phone and replied, "It's definitely still on, Mom. Just not the part you were invited to." Click. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. sharp. I wore a beautiful silk off-shoulder gown Eleanor had found in her vintage collection. No straps on my bruised shoulder, but still breathtaking. The aisle was now a path through the garden instead of the chapel stairs. The guests rose. Jordan stood waiting at the end with tears in his eyes, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. As the music swelled, I walked with Maya and 2 of Jordan's foster brothers by my side. When I reached the altar, we locked eyes and smiled. Meanwhile, across town, my parents and Caleb arrived at the venue only to find the gates shut and their names blacklisted from the guest list. My mother, in full makeup and glittery heels, stood screaming at the security guard, "I'm her mother!" The guard replied calmly, "Ma'am, you were removed from the guest list by the bride herself. Please step aside." Dad tried calling me. I didn't answer. Caleb texted Jordan saying, "Is this your idea of a joke?" Jordan simply sent back a photo, the 2 of us smiling at the altar, surrounded by people who chose to love us. After the ceremony, as the sun began to set and laughter filled the air, Eleanor pulled me aside. "You remind me of myself when I was young," she said softly. "You stood up for yourself even when no one else would." I hugged her tight. "Thank you for giving me the chance." Just then, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Mom. It said, "So now you're just going to erase us? After everything we gave you? You're ungrateful, Aubrey. You'll regret this." I hit delete. As we moved into the reception, our first dance began. The night sparkled with fairy lights, music, and the scent of lavender. For once, I wasn't someone's afterthought. I was me, whole, seen, and loved. But the story wasn't over yet, because the real surprise came 3 days later, in the form of a letter from a lawyer. It was addressed to me, and it was about Caleb's criminal history. 3 days after the wedding, I was sitting in my new apartment with Jordan, sipping coffee, when the envelope arrived. A thick, cream-colored letter from a private law firm, sealed and stamped. My heart pounded as I tore it open. It was from Eleanor, the venue owner and longtime friend of my grandmother. Apparently, she had done some quiet digging after hearing what happened during the rehearsal dinner. Inside the envelope was a neatly compiled report from her family's private investigator, screenshots, police reports, and court dockets. My brother Caleb had a sealed juvenile record and a long history of violent behavior covered up by hush money and sealed court settlements. He wasn't just a drunk with a temper. He had been involved in 2 prior physical assaults, one that left a girl with a fractured wrist, and another incident at a college frat party that was buried thanks to my father's old connections. He should have been expelled, charged, but he was protected. By them, by my parents. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why they defended him that night. Why they laughed. Why they told me not to make a scene while I lay bruised and humiliated in front of guests. They weren't just blind, they were complicit. I stared at the final line Eleanor had handwritten at the bottom. "Use this however you wish, but don't let them silence you again." And I didn't. I sent copies of the documents to every guest who had attended the rehearsal. I posted a redacted version of the police summaries on a private forum for survivors of family abuse. I emailed my extended family, including my estranged uncle and aunt who had always taken my side but had drifted away after years of my parents' manipulations. But the real move came next. My husband Jordan, bless him, had saved every voicemail and text message from my parents over the past year, some where they outright threatened to cut me off if I didn't fall in line, others where they casually belittled me, calling me names like emotional baggage, and once even texting, "You'll always be second place." I compiled it all. With the help of a lawyer friend, I filed for a restraining order against Caleb and publicly filed a cease and desist against my parents for harassment. And just when they thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Because my father's company, a local construction firm, was part of a joint venture that depended heavily on public image. And guess who now had a social media platform with tens of thousands of followers after I shared my story anonymously? Me. I didn't name names, I didn't have to. But within 72 hours of my post going viral, someone did. An old employee of my dad commented, "This sounds exactly like my old boss and his family." A former partner chimed in. Whispers turned into an avalanche. Sponsors pulled back, contracts paused. My father's firm was now under public pressure, and for the first time in his life, he couldn't control the narrative. And then came the phone call. "Aubrey," my mother's voice trembled. "Can we talk? This is getting out of hand." "You mean out of your hands?" I asked coldly. She sighed. "It was just a mistake, a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to let your son shove me down a flight of stairs," I cut in. "To laugh when I cried out in pain? To call me a drama queen in front of 80 people? Dead silence. Then I added, "You were right, Mom. I am dramatic. But now I know how to use it." I hung up. In the weeks that followed, my brother's college rescinded his alumni privileges after a formal complaint was refiled. His job offer, one that my dad had pulled strings to secure, was withdrawn quietly. And my parents? They faded into silence. No apology ever came. No, we were wrong. But I didn't need it, because I was building something new. Jordan and I used the remainder of our wedding fund to start a small wellness center focused on supporting survivors of family trauma. We called it the Second Circle, a place where people like me, discarded, dismissed, demeaned, could rebuild. Every wall had a mirror etched with a quote, "You are not the reflection of their cruelty." One morning, while painting the center's front door, a young girl passed by with a cast on her wrist. She stopped, looked at the sign, and whispered, "Is this for people like me?" I smiled. "It's for people like us." And in that moment I realized my wedding wasn't the start of a marriage. It was the end of a legacy I never wanted to carry. A legacy of silence, of favoritism, of enabling monsters while punishing survivors. I had cut the cord, reclaimed my voice, and finally left the rehearsal for good. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.